I'm going to show you how I built the U.S. Coast Guard Eagle in a bottle. Well, here's a photo of the real Eagle. It was built by Nazi Germany in 1936 and commissioned as the fourth vessel in 1938. It served to train German naval officers. In 1946, the United States won the ship as the spoils of World War II. It was a result of a drawing between the United States, Great Britain, and Russia over various ships and things that were available. The U.S. Coast Guard used the Eagle to train their officers. I've built other ships and bottles, but with the Eagle, I tried to get an exact scale and as much detail as possible. I think I've accomplished this. I included most all of the rigging, which includes rat lines, stays, and sheets. Sheets are the lines that run up to the bottom of the sails. Anyway, I reduced photographs down using Adobe Photoshop and made decals of the Coast Guard emblem and the nameplate on the stern. I also carved the Eagle figure for the bowsprit, which is very, very tiny, and made anchors out of lead. I used solder. Selecting the bottle became a major ordeal. I found a large rum bottle that looked great, but after removing the label, there was a flaw that revealed the distortion of the view. I figured it probably was just that one bottle, so I went and purchased another one, only to find out it had the same flaw. I ended up with an overstock of rum to drink. I had a 750 milliliter bottle of the 1800 tequila in my cabinet, although it was sort of square, it looked pretty good with a cork, and it had a 3/4 inch opening. So I decided it would be good if I used the larger 1.75 milliliter bottle of tequila 1800. So I purchased one of them. Upon opening it, I was shocked. It only had a screw-on cap with threads and only a 1/2 inch of orifice. So I decided to try to cut off the threads. So I did so with a hand file and a Dremel cutoff wheel, but I put it in a battery operated drill so I could operate it at slow speed, because when cutting glass you can't get it too hot or it'll crack where you don't want it to. This worked out pretty good, and then I was able to get an opening greater than 3/4 of an inch. Given this, now I had the dimensions of clearance and could scale down to meet what I ended up with, a scale of 20 thousandths of an inch would equal a foot. In other words, a 6-foot man would be 12 inches tall, or not 12 inches tall, 0.12 inches tall. There were no plans that I could find other than this drawing of the rigging. I did find a list of specifications on the Coast Guard Academy website. I was able to use them to scale down to what you see there. So after selecting a bottle, I came up with my own plans based on these specs and many pictures that I found on the internet. The Coast Guard Academy said the hull length of the Eagle at the waterline is 233 feet. They said the widest beam is 39 feet. The main and foremasts were 147.3 feet. The main yard arm was 78.8 feet. A few pictures that I downloaded from the many on the internet. I used this picture to grab an image of the starboard side so I could make a decal of the Coast Guard emblem. Here's a view of the port side. And here's the Eagle figurehead. I'm going to give you a brief idea of how I put the C in the bottle. This is not the bottle, this is the smaller one I had. But take this modeling plate, you can buy it at any art supply store, and I needed blue and green together to make hopefully a C color. And then I've got some special tools that I also made. Well, before you put the clay in there, you should take a piece of wood and glue it to the bottom of the bottle. A piece of wood should be smaller than the hull of the ship. so that you can glue the ship to that piece of wood and it'll be substantial. After the piece of wood's in, then you can pack all your clay around to make the seat. In order to do that, I made these tools that you can go in here and poke it all down and smooth it around. I even made a special one for going in the big bottles and be able to, a square bottle where you can get up into the front end of it to pat it all down. Stop. Okay, now it's time to start building the boat. It's completely assembled outside the bottle, but done in such a way that it can be collapsed down to fit through the neck of the bottle. It is then glued down and erected by pulling on various ropes, or threads I should say. I'll give more details later, a whole lot of details really. The hull is carved out of a solid piece of wood. Notice the deck is recessed. I did this by using a mill bit and a drill press along with an XY vise. The deck is formed from a wood called Mansonia, a 1/28 inch veneer, and a sample pack of veneers that I had, an exotic wood from Africa that I thought resembled teak. Penciled lines are drawn to look like planks. Railing posts are installed with wire. Holes were drilled that were a few thousandths of an inch smaller than the wire. Then the wire was forced in to the holes so that no glue was required. I used a drill press to ensure that the posts were all vertical. The bit was so small that I had to put it in my pin vise in order to chuck it up. Here's the semi-completed hull. The railings were made by gluing thread to the post using super glue. Now this is interesting in that I only use super glue where I need something to set quickly. I use clear Elmer's glue for most everything else because it dries clear and it gives you time to move things around. The molding on the sides is made up by gluing monofilament fishing line to the hull. The top one is 4-pound line and the bottom one is 10-pound line. The hull, including the railings, is then painted. Afterwards, the decals were applied. The decals were made from decal sheets that I purchased from Micromark. They're really interesting and good to use, and you can print them on your inkjet printer. The only problem with the inkjet printer is that the inkjet print is water soluble. So once you print them, you've got to seal them with a spray of fixative. And this makes them where they don't apply real indivisibly, but putting a clear coat of nail polish over them or whatever helps out quite a bit. The bowsprit, the Eagle figurehead, and notice the orange life preservers were all added next. We're now ready to start on the mast, the yard arms, sails, and the rigging. This comes a very complicated part and a fun part. This is my rigging map. It shows where the sails are going and everything. The bottom one picture shows a drill pattern for all the masts. It's showing a side view and the front view of each of the masts and where to drill the holes. And as you notice, there's a gob of holes, and they're very complicated and needed to be very precise and not to conflict with each other. Also, this map provided all the labeling for me to label all the threads coming out as to what they were attached to. In the process of building this thing, I've done a lot of test cases on sample pieces before I do it to the real thing to make sure that everything's going to work fine. In order to make these masts and everything's collapsible, I put a hinge at the bottom of each mast and I make it out of brass wire so that it can fold down. Now, interesting enough, it has to fold down with the sails. Okay, now the yard arms on the sails have to be everything loose enough that you can fold it up like that. And then after it gets past the bottle neck and inside, then you can open them all up. In this case, I've got wires or ropes going through to the bottoms of the sail so that you can pull them into the yard arm at the bottom. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about mast making. First of all, a few tools that are absolutely necessary. One is this drill index full of micro bits, from 1/1000th of an inch to 60,000ths of an inch. And this is available through Micro Mark also. The other thing is this guide or tool for getting a dowel rod smaller than 1/16th of an inch. And it works pretty neat. You just run it through, and you get down to the smallest size that you want, and then you can stop. The other thing, this is absolutely necessary, and that's these needle threaders. They are so thin and tiny that I keep losing them. You drop them, you can't even see them, but they're absolutely necessary for pulling the threads through these tiny holes that we're about to drill. Okay, I use the hand pin vise for drilling mast and yard arms, and I use this long push drill if I'm drilling a hole. Push drill here if I'm drilling a hole all the way through the hole. But for these masts and stuff, I do two things. First of all, I'll do a little bit of like a punch to get the center of the dowel, and then put my drill in there and go ahead and drill through. Okay, so now I've got a hole. Now I've already lost my here it is. I didn't pull it out. You take a needle threader and try to find your hole. You can pull it through the hole. Okay, once you got the needle threaded through the hole, go ahead and insert your thread. And then pull it through. And that is neat. Nice loose hole. You run the thread back and forth. Okay, now I'm going to show how to make and install some sails. A little dab of Elmer's glue. Take a toothpick or something and put the tiniest little drop on the corners of the sail. And then take the thread and put it in the glue. Actually, touching the glue and then putting it there works pretty good. You can see it's tedious, but you want it right there on the corner. Perfect. Now the other thread, a little touch of glue, and where'd the other thread go? There it is. We'll use this one. Touch the end of the thread to the glue and lay it down, and then move it into this position, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Right off the corner. Perfect. When that dries, we'll put it on the yard arm. I made the sails from regular printer paper, inkjet 20-pound printer paper. I printed a bunch of fine gray lines on it to look like seams in the sails. Okay, before we attach the sail, one of the first things we've got to do is curve it a little bit. Get a round dowel or something like that, just kind of like wrap around it a little bit. Give it a little bit of curvature. Okay, then take your Elmer's glue. Dab there. And very carefully coat cover the yard arm with Elmer's glue, being careful not to get it anywhere near the two holes on either end. Okay. Then take the sail and touch it to the glue. Position it where you want. And it's attached to the yard arm. Once that dries, we can thread the sheets through the yard below that, which isn't on this little test jig, and move on to the next sail. There's a total of 21 sails in this boat, so it's quite a chore. I made this loom for weaving rat lines. The first thing I did was come up with a design, how big I wanted to make it, the spacing and all that sort of thing. I did it for 5 lines, 1 vertical. Then I transposed that over to here and drilled holes a little bit smaller than a brass tack. And I put brass tacks in and cut their heads off. The way you use this thing is, first thing you do is lay down a little piece of wax paper so the glue won't stick to the paper or the wood or whatever, and then just weave it. Well, weave the vertical lines first, then I weave the horizontal lines right across the top of that. I just tape the ends down and then paint over it, this part, fairly heavily with clear nail polish. And once that dries, you can take it up and take an X-Acto knife and cut off the strings that stick out and all that. You'll notice the size of this thing for the mast on the Eagle that I'm going to put in the bottle, not even much wider than a penny. My daughter asked, how in the world did I get such a small flag? This is how it was. I used TurboCAD and I drew a big one and then reduced it down to a couple of choices and made a reverse image for the backside. I made the stand to hold the ship while constructing it outside the bottle. Once the hull has the mast attached with the brass hinges that are twisted on the bottom of the hull, then I could screw the hull to the stand to help support it while working on it. I made this piece of balsa wood out here, thin balsa wood with slits in it, which makes it real easy to pull the threads there and hold them and try to keep the threads organized quite a bit. Here's the finished ship with everything assembled the way I want it to go into the bottle. The easy part is over. It's now time to get it into the bottle, and the rest of the work will be inside the bottle, which makes it extremely difficult. I did a couple of dry runs at trying to see if it would fit through the neck, and I was in a real dilemma when I laid all 3 masts down towards the stern. It made it too thick and it wouldn't possibly go through. Oh my gosh, I had to do a redesign. The only thing I could think of was to take the foremasts and lean it towards the bow, and then the other 2 masts towards the stern. To do this, I had to redesign the rigging and how it would come out, and how to pull the foremast back up. This added a lot of extra ropes, but my little test case worked. Finally arrived. here it goes. The foremast here will fold down as it goes through. Okay, now that we're in the bottle, I need to show you some of the tools that I had to make to work inside the bottle. Most of them are all handcrafted. Here's a set of tweezers I made that are very handy. Some longer ones. And then various tools for reaching in and doing things. And nice little horizontal tweezer here. And actually some of the most useful tools are just a piece of dowel rod with a piece of wire, because I can bend the wire to go around things, like if I'm going to glue inside there, that kind of deal. Then a bunch of probes, and I made a little extender handle where I can put a different probe in there. Then I got into a bunch of cutting tools, because when you get in there, you got to cut all them threads. And I've got a bunch of long wire things, and I had to drill and tap a number 2 screw so I could attach various X-Acto blades, you know, at different angles and everything. Here's a straight one. And this particular tool is just an extension handle for the X-Acto knife. And really, part of the cutting stuff, these scissors were some cuticle scissors that cut really well, and I extended them real long. And these probably were one of the most useful cutting tools there were, because I could cut 75% of the threads with this. And then, when I'm gluing things in the bottle, more often than not, I would accidentally bump the side of the glass. I'd bump the side of the glass, and Q-tips with the cardboard on there, you can bend them to an angle, and you go in there and you can wipe off the glue, wet it and wipe off the glue. And then when you get done, I made a tool. You go in there and clean the bottle, clean the side. I dip it in Windex and go in there and clean, and that worked really well. We're now in the bottle. The hull is glued down, and the ropes to pull are hanging out of the neck. Here the ropes have all been glued down to the mast or wherever they got to go, and then cut off. Quite a bird's nest of ropes and whatever. By contrast, this is a previous model that I built. It's the Blue Nose schooner, the Grand Banks fishing schooner that I built a couple of years ago. It only had 6 ropes coming out of the neck of the bottle to pull. The following are shots of the final product.